Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us during your very busy lunchtime. So, welcome to Tiffin Talks. Now, Tiffin Talks has been conceived as a series of 3 lunchtime webinars, which will provide you with a beginning working knowledge and experience of artistic research. So, by asking the fundamental question, what is it? How to think it? How to do it? This series will also include practical problems to be solved with and explored with each installment. So in this way, we hope that it will completely open up the field to you in order to approach it as well as to do it yourself. Right. Now, a little bit about the speaker, our own Professor William Ray Lagenbach, who is the chair for our Center of Artistic Research, CIFA. Those of us who know him as an academic will be gratified to also know that he has been a working professional artist for years before that. Right. So as his academic and art practice consists of a wide and diverse range of output. It consists also of conceptual performances, convening artistic gatherings, writing on performing arts, cultural theory, and queer culture. So he's basically artist, writer, convener, archivist, educator, all rolled into one. So we are extremely fortunate to have him here at CIFA, as well as here at Utah, because he's also developing a PhD program in artistic research for the university that focuses on guiding creative practitioners in the arts to conduct practice-led research themselves. Right. So for the very first Tiffin Talk, the inaugural installment, Artistic Research Step 1, Introduction to the Field. This will focus on how to approach the whole subject of artistic research by drawing inspiration from the events in your own life as a basis to design your research and art practice. So, without further ado, Tiffin Talks 1 coming up.
Okay, artistic research. We have to come to a kind of working definition of its two terms, research and artistic. You might say that research is just curiosity. Basically, it's curiosity, but it's activated and given a methodology. I won't say it's weaponized, but it's given a kind of methodology of searching and finding rather than searching and destroying. So it's a way of searching. It's developing methodologies of searching for information. But it's basically just curiosity. When you boil it down to a sludge at the bottom of the pot, you have curiosity. And it's also an organic function. That means it kind of emerges out of people, emerges out of the mind, emerges out of the field. And simply stated, researchers do their research because of their desire to know something. Research is knowledge creation. The term artistic calls forth aesthetics. And aesthetics, I'm going to define for this event as the organization of material or mental objects in space and time. Aesthetic organization underlies all human categories and activities and reflects how the world is sensed, how we sense the world through our senses and through our mind and our cognition. For our purposes today, I suggest that the arts in general function as a subset or as subsets of the larger category of design. So design is kind of an overarching category within which you find the arts. So you have dance, and you have declamation, performance, you have visual art, you have animation, you have film, all of these arts, and they're under this larger category of design. Design actually enters into every kind of human activity. When you go into an operating room and you see the order of the operating room, or you go into a factory and you see the right angles, that everything is organized. This is aesthetics. How forms are distributed in space and time, that's aesthetics. So it's a broad definition of aesthetics. So art and research are two sides of the same coin, and that coin is focused. The research is a focus on a phenomenon or issue or theory or history or skill or activity, an idea. Art is a focus on an action concept or an action idea. I'm taking that from semiotics. Action concept or an action idea. In other words, it's something in process, depending on the interpretive frame that it's in and depending on the context, the social, political context that it's in. So action concepts or action ideas then lead to other action ideas. So much art is made, but not all, is made by sticking with a process long enough and deep enough down the rabbit hole of a particular subject until a double transformation takes place. And if you go back to the Jungian notion of alchemical transformation, Jung's reinterpretation of alchemical texts, which are quite fascinating, what you find is that material or substance is infused with consciousness. And that's what makes art. That's what makes design. You need consciousness and intention to transform matter into matter idea, into art, into design. But this opens a can of worms, and a kind of dilemma takes shape, where the art becomes a map of the artist's life at a one-to-one resolution. The dilemma is demonstrated in this video by the Finnish artist Roy Vara, whose work reminds me of absurdist theater of Samuel Beckett and the physical paradoxes of Buster Keaton. Lewis Carroll, a mathematician and who wrote Alice in Wonderland, which you probably know, he imagined a nation where the cartographers, the map makers, in their quest to create a perfect map, gradually expanded the scale of their maps of the country from a scale of 6 inches to a mile, and then 6 yards to a mile, and then 100 yards to a mile, until they finally resolved their country at a scale of 1 mile to a mile, 1 to 1. But they had to discard that map because the farmers complained that when it was rolled out, it blocked the sun and killed all the crops. So in the end, they decided to use the country itself as a perfect map of itself. Can something be a representation of itself and itself at the same time? Perhaps it makes sense to look at the practice of art and design as we would look at a map of a landscape, a perfect map of a landscape. Can art function as a kind of transparent map exactly at the scale of the life that it represents, so that it becomes impossible to distinguish between the art and the life? So today I'm going to show two types of works. Those that are centripetally bring in and distill information, and those that centrifugally expand information following a pattern described by the art historian Leo Bronstein. The notion of substitution and correspondence to two strands which create a braid of culture. In the first category of this distilling or substitution, Roy Vara's Artist Dilemma that you just saw, my Virion work, Bita Razavi and Jaakko Karhunen doing things with words and divorce ceremony. And then in the correspondence strand, you have the centrifugal expansion into cultural histories and vast amounts of information in the work itself. Rather than distilling to a punctum in the presented work, it expands into all this other information, contextual information. And that's Lucy Davis's Migrant Ecologies and Wong Hoi Chong's On Migrants and Rubber Trees. This is Virion, each day in control period, and its extensions. I would walk in the cemetery with the dogs, and I would find that sand burrs would attach every day to my clothing. So I began to drag my masks through the grass. So I had one mask per day, basically, for this period of time. 84 of these masks covered with the sand burrs. And I'm sure that we've all encountered sand burrs here in Malaysia. And during this period, the cemetery did not do their normal destruction, by pouring poison and herbicide on the grave sites. So the graveyard became very beautiful. But it also became a place of dengue, or I think that's always been the case anyway. And I got dengue while I was doing a project. I was going out and photographing the photographs on the tombs, heading toward another work. And I became quite obsessed with these photographs and how the photographs are of people in the middle of their lives. They're not at the end of their lives. These are not death photographs. It's not like Tu Slong prison, the elementary school that was made into a prison by the Khmer Rouge, where you see people at the last moments of their life before they're taken out and shot or bludgeoned. And those photographs are very different. These are relaxed people in the middle of their lives, but that photograph is then used by the family to memorialize them after their death. So it's quite a fascinating paradox. But my colleague, Liu Kung Yu, photographer, was very concerned about this project that I was doing. And we were going to show our work together. And he said, you have to apologize to the spirits if you're doing this. You're taking their likeness. And I didn't. I got dengue, and he was absolutely sure. I'm sure that I got the dengue in the graveyard because I did not properly apologize to the spirits. So that's all part of the research. This is a distillation which distills into a punctum, into a moment, a process. And I made this slightly tongue-in-cheek. It's a certificate of ephemeral virtue that you get if you buy this. You don't get much virtue, and it doesn't last forever. It's something that disappears in a moment. So you don't get much for your 100 ringgit. And then the money was donated to Tanaginita, which was helping refugees. And this is how the exhibition appeared in the window of A+ works of art in Centripetal. Another distillation, how to do things with words. A legal performance by Vito Razavi in collaboration with Jaakko Karhunen in 2011 in Helsinki. The video shows the artist getting married in her working studio in the Finnish Academy of Fine Arts. And I was involved in this because I was an examiner of her master's thesis. The studio is built to resemble the official marriage room in the registration office in Helsinki, where people have a half an hour to get married with presence of 2 witnesses. The focus of the theatricality and the switch between documentary and fictitious style of the video. This video is her video of this event, raises the question of the validity of the marriage and the motivation behind it, which is answered in the work by 2 frame documents that are mounted on the wall. The marriage certificate and the immigration request. She's Iranian, trying to become a resident of Finland, and she's doing a marriage with Jaakko, who is Finnish, in order to stay in Finland, not just as a student, but afterwards. The whole work was based on the linguistic philosopher J.L. Austin's theory of performative speech acts, of how to do things with words, and that's the title of the performance. Now, a performative is when you declare something, and by so declaring it, you bring it into being. You bring it into a physical transformation in real space and time. When the minister in the Lutheran tradition, in which they use in Finland, declares, or the civil servant declares, "I hereby declare you to be husband and wife," that is a performative. Or when you say, "I declare that a state of war exists between our countries," that's a declarative and a performative, because from that point on, this state of war exists.
Okei, hei. Mä voisin ottaa sun allekirjoituksen yhteen paperiin. Joo. Eli tällaisen. Eli tähän tulisi allekirjoitusnimi ja selvennys sitten. Kiitoksia. Kiitos.
Tervetuloa.
Okay, Vita and Jaakko, you have chosen to love one another. Love is a wonderful feeling. It carries life. To one another, you are the most important people in the world, living for yourself and each other. You have the whole lifetime to share your love. Marriage is intended to be permanent, so as to allow the family members to establish a happy home together. Before these witnesses, I ask you, Vita Rasavi, will you take this Jaakko Karhunen to be your wedded husband, to love him for better or for worse?
I do.
Before these witnesses, I ask you, Jaakko Karhunen, will you take this Vita Rasavi to be your wedded wife, to love her and for better or for worse?
I do.
As you both answered my question in the affirmative, I, in the virtue of my office, now pronounce you husband and wife. And then the rings, please. Vita, take the ring from your husband as a sign of your union. Jaakko, take the ring from your wife as a sign of your union. Wedding ring is a symbol of the promises that you are giving today for each other. Keep the ring as a reminder of this moment when your hopes and aspirations of future come together. You are now joined together in marriage. As spouses, you are equal. So fidelity, love, and mutual trust for each other in marriage and act together for the good of the family. Jaakko, you may now kiss your bride. Here's something I want to give you, is a marriage certificate. Congratulations to you both.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks. I wish you all the best. Thank you.
Okay, people then file out, so I'm going to move on. But notice what the camera captures, and Vita is doing that quite purposefully when she edited the film. The discomfort, nobody, including the two of them, know how to interpret that which is uninterpretable. Because it's two things simultaneously. So, okay, so now we move on to the divorce, which happened 6 years later. Vita's divorce ceremony was a public event again, and her statement about it was, we don't have to stay married anymore. We want to say this publicly because we believe that society does not consist of units, families, marriages, residence permits, and nationalities. These are the relationships we have founded ourselves as individuals. They are the forces that act upon our bodies. These relationships individualize us. In the divorce ceremony, Rasavi returns, speaking in the third person now, to bring to a close an older work with Jaakko Karhunen. This legal union enabled her to get a permanent European residence permit as a result of a 6-year-long process of tackling the legal social system. Now this process or bureaucratic performance is over, and she can ceremonially divorce herself from the legal contract to individualize herself again, thereby closing the cycle.
Good evening. Let me introduce myself. I'm Alexandra McGill, your Master of Ceremonies for today's joyful occasion, the divorce ceremony of Vita Rasavi and Jaakko Karhunen. Welcome. Please switch your phones to silent mode. And I'm happy to introduce Markus Kontinen, the Dean of the Academy of Fine Arts of the University of the Arts, Helsinki, who will now perform the ceremony.
Dear audience, I invite the witnesses of the marriage, Salla Tykkä and Kari Yliannala, to witness this divorce as well, please. So, Pita and Jaakko, with this work, you have gone through a long journey. Now that you have chosen to end this project and part from each other in the presence of these witnesses, I ask you, Pita Ratsavi and Jaakko Karhunen, do you acknowledge that in the eyes of the law, you will no longer be joined in the bond of matrimony?
We do.
We do, yeah.
As the Dean of the Academy of Fine Arts of the University of the Arts, Helsinki, by the power vested in me by this institution, I now pronounce you divorced. And now the rings, please. Thank you. I will cut them. As a symbol of your newfound independence, we will hereby shred the marriage document. So, please. You are no longer husband and a wife, but independent individuals once again.
Hän kulkevi kuin yli kukkien. Hän käy kunis sävelten silmiin. Sinislaulujen laineilla käydä hän saa. Ja kulkea kukkien
Please raise your glasses and join me in toasting Pita and Jaakko, two newly independent beings. Cheers. Cheers. I now invite those gathered here today.
6 years, the entire experience boiled down to a moment in time, one evening. These are performative performances that bring the state of marriage into existence and then dissolve it. Wang Chun, very different, of migrants and rubber trees, was doing paintings which were inspired by Malaysian books and Indonesian books. His real talent is not in painting. It's in drawing, it's in rendering, and his drawings are extraordinary and they're wonderful. The exhibition really showed that. He began to research his family's migration. So the exhibition is really a punctum of a kind of his family's migration to Malaya from China, portraits of the different people, but also rubber, migrations of people coming to Malaya and the substance of rubber. His father was a rubber tapper. The family was linked with the history of rubber. He put these two histories together, and he began to research the colonial history of rubber in Malaya, the vulcanization process, and following the trail back to Brazil, and the colonial experience in Brazil of enslavement of the native people there to tap the rubber there. Other documents showing how Britain invited rubber tappers to come over. So you had a bunch of US cowboys arriving with guns to protect the rubber investment of Britain. The strangest war in the world is being fought with increasing ferocity. The thousands of red bandits hide in the jungle, make daily hit and run attacks on the rubber plantations. After 4 years, the red strategy is plain: kill the planters, strike fear into the rubber workers, disrupt rubber production by tree slashing. The aim is to wreck the rubber-dependent economy of strategic Malaya. Strategic to whom? To Britain, of course, and to deprive America and other free nations of one of the world's most vital commodities, natural rubber. One of the reasons this plan has not worked is the Malayan rubber grower. He has refused to be licked. He has produced near record tonnages of natural rubber. He holds a front line in the fight for freedom. So the Cold War enters the rubber industry. And then after that, new immigrants arrive who are not part of that industry, but a part of other industries. So he carries the research into their lives and into the present, and it does portraits of them. Moving on to Lucy Davis, Migrant Ecologies Project. She found a secondhand teak bed frame and brought it home to her home in Singapore. And she wondered where it came from, with the same kind of curiosity that drove Hui Chong. What if I begin to look into the history of this? Where did this come from? How did these people arrive? How did rubber itself arrive? She took a piece of the bed to a DNA lab in Singapore, and they traced it tentatively to a village in Sulawesi, in Indonesia. So she went to Sulawesi, traveling backwards across the trade routes that ran from the forests of Indonesia to Singapore's timber market. You can go to the Migrant Ecologies website and get this entire history. This led to a series of large drawings and woodblock prints made from the pieces of her bed frame, miniature wayang kulit sets for filming, and an award-winning stop-action film. So this is a vast project, and that has led to other projects on trees, on birds, the relationships between humans and other species. Okay, thank you. For those who want to actually try your hand at artistic research, I have an assignment for you. If you would like to, explore your genetic heritage. Map your family tree back as far as you can. It can be a writing or visual record. You can use any materials you have on hand. It can be 2D, 3D, 4D. That means with time-based documents. This is an opportunity to sleuth information from your parents, from grandparents, aunts, uncles, the questions about your family's past. Ask the questions you have not asked. You can make it as detailed as you want. For example, from documents, interviews, family oral histories, photos, films, video, audio recordings, and you can include or not origins, habitats, homes, communities, gender, sexuality, love affairs, marriages, divorces, incest, unacceptable love affairs in the history of the family, caste and class, occupations, skills, achievements, their creative engagements, works of art, design, inventions, books coming out of the family, tragedies, accidents, traumas, wars, displacements, self-imposed or family-imposed exiles, crimes, murders, suicides, family secrets, addictions to drugs, alcohol, places of birth, ages, disabilities, diseases, and causes of death. Align your aesthetic choices to how you feel about your family or the information you find, so it portrays your family not just in the information, but also in the aesthetics. That is how you present the information. And this is for you. It can be private, it can be public if you wish. But if you wish to carry on a dialogue with me about it, please digitize it or parts of it and attach it to an email and send it over. The two paragraph description of the family tree and your experience of making it, and include whether you're happy with it as a work of artistic research, and I will respond and we can carry on a dialogue. Okay, that's it. Thank you for listening.
All right. Thank you so much, Ray, for that extremely insightful talk and amazing artworks that you presented, both yours as well as everyone else's. So now we don't have much time for Q&A, but we do have a few questions here. So there was a very early question raised by Carmen when you, right at the beginning, when you talked about the introduction of art and design. So she felt that it's strange to say that arts is a subset of design, because she felt that it should be the other way around. Design should be a subset of the arts, because arts primarily ask questions, whereas design proposes solutions. So what do you have to say about that?
I would say that the solutions in design are a product of the questions that design asks. I think the same kind of process of the arrangement of forms in the sensate world, the world of sense, is undergone. But there's an added element in the arts, and that is metaphorical, metonymic, symbolic activity carrying a different kind of content, so that you have a kind of doubling of meanings, where a very intentional act of meaning transmission is presenting in the designs that are presented. So I would say that the art then therefore is a subset of that larger category of everything which is designed, and there's nothing human that is not designed. Okay, we arrange spaces, we arrange our houses, we arrange our objects on a table, we arrange our dinner, we arrange everything, and that kind of aesthetics is all design. But not all of it has an intentional, a symbolic value, and that's why I understand, and that people think it's the other way around. But I think that actually, when you begin to notice that everything is design, that symbolic value becomes a subset of that. If that makes sense, hopefully.
Yeah, Carmen, are you satisfied with that, or would you like to respond?
I still can't fully agree, but I'll just let it sit and think about it some more because there's not much time.
Yeah.
I think this does dovetail into what I would like to find out more from you, Ray, is your understanding of aesthetics, which is for me quite confusing because I've always understood aesthetics to have some element of taste or preference or, ideas of beauty. And the way you think about aesthetics is almost like it doesn't matter, that question of taste or beauty, as it were. Because when you talk about Lucy Davis's work in your slide, you said something in your slide. You said Lucy's work is deeper and more profound, has a deeper and more profound aesthetics. So my thinking would be deeper and more profound in comparison to what? The actual teak bed? Or, what are we comparing it to? Because she's doing something completely, entirely novel. So how can we compare it to anything, and how would we have a discussion about aesthetics when there is no comparison? Usually we know our taste because this is better than that. But if there's no that to be better too, then what is this aesthetically? That would be my kind of questions. Yeah. Thanks.
This is a long discussion. It's a great. I think the same thing happened to the word aesthetics in our view of the arts as it happened in a sense to the word design. That it became reduced, we're actually we're talking about, once again, the arrangement of forms, the categorization of forms, in the sensate world, in the sensorium, the human sensorium. If you look at on the web and you look up forensic aesthetics, the term forensic aesthetics, and that comes out of a group called Forensic Architecture, which is A.O. Weissman and others who are working with him. And it's a group, and they do exhibitions around in different parts of the world. That they have changed the way that aesthetics is viewed. And I think that they've done that for anyone who kind of encounters their work. Because they're using the arrangement of forms in time and space, such as the speed of a bullet arriving in the head of a Palestinian driver who's driving a car which then careens into some Israeli soldiers. And by looking at the trajectory of that bullet, the distance that the bullet traveled, the speed with which that bullet traveled, the speed of the car, all of those elements, and the weight of the car, when did the driver actually die in that event? Did the driver, therefore, as the Israelis were claiming, drove into the soldiers, or did the car careen into the soldiers because the bullet had already found its mark in his head? That is a forensic aesthetic investigation. So once forensics enters into aesthetics, it changes the way we look at aesthetics. And my own interest in that is habeas corpus, how bodies in performance on the stage are, and the presentation of the body on the stage is similar to the presentation of the body in the court, in a defense of a person. So that also is an aesthetic question.
Hi, this is Wu here. It seems to be you're moving from Kant, right? When it comes to aesthetic. moving away from Kant.
Yeah.
Kant.
So it's where I am aware that you're not looking at in aesthetic as in terms of sensory or fields.
I guess so. I'm not a Kant scholar, so I can't tell you exactly how far away from Kant I'm moving. But and I think that some of the categories of Kant still certainly apply. The lyrical, the sublime, etc. Those are all still part of aesthetics. But aesthetics is wider than that. It's no longer and the notion of beauty is no longer central.
We can open up the discussion to again Carmen's earlier question about using one's own artistic research as a starting point, because she thinks that okay, that's a great idea, but is it centripetal or centrifugal? So maybe you'd like to
both. I think all those works are forms of artistic artistic research, but artistic research moves, and I'm not saying this, I've created a binary, and I apologize for that. And it looks like everything is either centripetal or centrifugal. I don't think so. And everything is substitution or correspondence in Bronstein's terms. No. And Bronstein was constantly discussing the braid and how the braid, then the synergy of those two, substitution and correspondence. And they're quite complex terms, which I'm not really unpacking here very much. So, but that braid is what forms culture, and it's multifarious. It's multidimensional. It's much more complex. So it's that in this particular idea to have an organizational principle in this short 1 hour webinar, and I decided to use those two terms, the distillation and expansion. That certain works expand into the cultural histories, deep dives into migration, into how certain kinds of materials arrived in Malaya. For Hui Chong, who was maybe the first person here in this country to actively work with artistic research, and whenever you say first, it's always wrong. So that I just made an error. But the first I know about, and because I wouldn't, there are others who were dealing with theoretical concepts, but for this kind of deep dive into history and cultural histories, I would say Hui Chong was the first to do that. Then and Lucy Davis, you can see how it starts with this bed, and from a junk shop, and then she just expands it to include so much, and it just keeps going. And Hui Chong does the same thing with rubber and his family's migration, the migration of rubber. And he just expands into the history of the materials, the colonial history, the politics. He moves through so many categories. And on the other side, you have this distillation in Bita's work, where our entire 6 years in marriage is distilled into these two performances. So I'm sorry I've created a binary, but I thought it was a way of then talking about their work, and kind of elucidating their concerns.
Okay.
But it's all artistic research.
Right. We have a question from Salvin. Yes. So Salvin does have a question.
Okay. Thanks, Eugene. Hi, Ray. Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, I just want to go back to the how you set up the question, because you have mentioned that artistic research, in a way, is a form of knowledge creation or knowledge production. So, and you have brought up Bronstein in terms of the notion of distillation and expand. Could you sort of I think in a way you have already addressed that just before I asked the question, but how can we, or how can an audience, or in what way the knowledge is important, or could be, and I think we have to be very careful here, it could be assessed or interpreted through the artistic form or even the aesthetic experience. How do we find that, or how do they equate that? Because I think that would be interesting in terms of the scholar issue that you're talking about when you talk about the one-to-one scholar, or a differentiation of that scholar, when it, to as a kind of metaphor, I suppose, as your allegory, I suppose, right? To bring this up. But I'm just curious about how do we underpin, okay? Especially like, let's say you take an example of as an examiner of that performance, but also which has certain legality in so-called real life, right? So what is the knowledge being articulated or transmitted? In what way can we actually defend it both ways or different ways?
Yeah,
I hope my question is clear enough, or it makes sense. Thanks.
I'll take a stab at it. That's great. It's good. Good question. I think that, you know, you have to begin to then talk about registers. So for example, in, you know, what Bita did was she forced her examiners who were there. They were hired by the university, I being one, to examine the work, the MFA work. And so we had a job to do. But what she did was by forcing us into the work, by claiming that we were taking a role, we were performing a task. And what she was doing was performing, and she decided that her performance would then include our performance. And it was a taming of the institution. She was suddenly, to a certain extent, in control. So how do we examine something that we're in? And that became a serious problem. And I had to address it. And I didn't show my final examination statement about her work. I passed her, by the way. We're talking about different registers, and one of the registers is how the work is done. How it's the how of the work, and the other is the kind of the what of the work. You know, so and the style. The style. And I'm going to go back to Bronstein again. The what of the how. The style which is used, and the style is this aesthetics. How are forms arranged? How are the bodies arranged in this theatrical event, which we didn't read. You know, as examiners, you don't normally read your job as part of a theatrical event, but it is. It's all ritual. It's all theater at one level or another. And if you look at Geertz's writings, and in Bali, the ritual, the theater of ritual in Bali, for example, you begin to realize that ritual and theater cross. And therefore every student has a kind of entrance point there to take control of the event, but very rarely does because of course we're all afraid of being failed as a result of that. But that artistic research actually opens that door. As soon as that door is open, somebody like Bita arrives who says, oh, gee, I could do this, I can do that. I can enter in, I can actually examine the examiners. Yeah, I can turn the tables. I can work with that because it's all performance anyway. But it's But you notice that she created the ritual. She did it. She followed the standards very carefully. She had her aesthetics worked out. The rectilinear design, creating the studio, creating the event, organizing the legality of it. All of it was highly organized, highly disciplined as an artist, but at the same time, it had this other realm to it. And artistic research opens that, because artistic research allows practice in all of its complexity to enter into what has traditionally been a very narrow discursive ritual. Okay, I don't know if that gets to what you're asking.
Yeah, I think it does in a certain way. I think in a separate conversation, I'm just mentioning to Carmen, we are talking about also the idea of a practice-based practice research. What's the difference between practice-led and practice-based research? But I think I really appreciate what you're talking about, because in a way also problematizing the body of knowledge that she refers to, but also problematizing the form this is how I understand what you're saying to us, in a sense that it problematized the so-called form that is taking place in a way. Yeah, thanks, Ray. Yeah.
And when you boil it right down, practice-based research, practice-based art, degrees are exactly the same as artistic research, except that usually they demand, and each university is slightly different on this. They demand different kinds of products, such as a longer dissertation, or in the MFA. In some universities, there's no dissertation at all. There's simply an oral exam. So it really gets down into kind of the brass tacks of how universities function, and the crossover overlay of these different categories of assessment. Because assessment and that performance of assessment that's what Beta was aiming her arrows at. Yeah.
Carmen?
Ray, can I just ask a question, just out of curiosity, for Beta's work, what does she have to provide by way of like a written documentation? Does she have to explain how she set up the space and how she organized, designed the placement of objects? Does she have to do that, or is that kind of like not stated overtly?
No, it's not stated overtly. This is she was at that time working out not from the University of the Arts. She was working from an art school, which was the Kuvataida Academia, which was the Academy of Fine Arts in Finland, and as an art school, they went up as actually they went all the way to PhD, but they were not demanding written dissertations at the MFA level.
I mean, the reason why I ask is because there's also quite a bit of cultural interface that goes on with something so ritualistic and legalistic. Because let's say if you have someone from another country who knows nothing about Finnish legal landscape, some maybe of the elements in that ritual might be familiar, like you have the bride, the groom, but a lot of other things might be quote unquote lost in translation, right? So if she didn't specify it, how will we know she has aesthetically conformed to what is expected versus she's just doing whatever she wants? That to me would be, I wouldn't get it if I was there. I mean, to me, it seemed like a very cold, sterile marriage ceremony. And I thought was like, is this like truly what Finnish wedding, marriage ceremony is like? Because it seems so like fake.
Yeah.
Right. So to be that kind of like, if you don't have that documentation, then culturally it will be lost to even examiners who may not be from that culture, assuming like in the case of yourself, I don't know how much you know of Finnish culture, things like that.
Yeah, it would definitely be lost in Iran, where she's from. So she's an immigrant into Finnish society, And I see her works as definitely a commentary of an Iranian on Finnish society. It's a critique of the formalism of Finnish society, which is extremely formalistic, and has this kind of cold element, particularly to somebody from Iran, and the Lutheran procedures and rituals would be very alien. But that's what she was aiming for. She was commenting on as she was using. And yes, to me, it would be much richer, quite frankly, if she had written, what we ask at UTAR, which is a half a dissertation. The 50,000 words or 40 to 50,000 words, of reflection on that. And if she did a PhD in the University of the Arts now, she would be writing a dissertation.
I think that's about it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay. All right. So should we wrap up? Okay.
I hope it was, it kind of opened it up. It's a taster, a teaser on artistic research. Certainly not the whole picture. So next time, the next, which is 1 month from now, I'll talk about scores. And everybody's familiar with musical scores, but there are scores in art as well. And scores in performance, scores in art. And how do scores enter into this this field of creating art and artistic research?
Okay, so yeah, we sorry, Joanne. We just to recap, we'll be having our next session scheduled on the 25th of March. Joanne posted it very nicely over on the chat, and then on the 15th of April.
If anyone wants to continue dialogue, to try out the family tree exercise, and they want some feedback on it, and to dialogue about it, then those are my contacts. Once again, thank you.
Okay.
All right. Thank you very much, Ray. Thank you very much, everybody who bothered to attend this during your very, very busy lunch.